Donald Trump is facing some heat today, not from the GOP, but from others, regarding his statements on Twitter in regard to freshman Democrats. He had initially tweeted, "So interesting to see progressive Democrat congresswomen who originally came from countries whose governments are a complete and total catastrophe, the worst, most corrupt and inept anywhere in the world." I kind of agree with him here. If they even have a functioning government at all. Now let me pause and just say, 3 out of the 4 freshman Democrats were born here in the United States, which is why I kind of agree with Trump, especially when it comes to corruption. Right. But of course, that's not what he meant. He continues to tweet, "Now loudly and viciously telling the people of the United States, the greatest and most powerful nation on earth, how our government is to be run. Why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came?" So Washington? Like, okay. "Then come back and show us how it is done. These places need your help badly. You can't leave fast enough. I'm sure that Nancy Pelosi would be very happy to quickly work out free travel arrangements." Now that reference to Nancy Pelosi kind of speaks to the infighting within the Democratic Party. Pelosi has been, at battle with freshman Democrats. In fact, she's been fighting them more aggressively than she's been fighting Donald Trump, which really tells you something. But nonetheless, he did get a lot of backlash from members of the left, certainly not from the right. The GOP has been defending him over and over again in regard to what he had to say. But I wanted to open this up to you guys. Any takes on these tweets?
He is really pandering to his audience, to his community, to his constituents in creating this us, them persona, as well as really reinforcing these ethnocentric ideologies that people from other countries or that people who look a certain way, that they're somehow deficient. And also really kind of just pushing that trope that anybody who is brown or of a different color in the United States isn't from here, or they should not be here, or there's some otherness about them that makes them problematic. And it's really old and it's unfortunate, but the reality is that it works because there are so many ignorant people out there. And and we kind of really get that ethnocentric vibe by virtue of saying that this is the greatest nation, the most wonderful nation in the world, when we have considerable issues, as you pointed out, Anna.
It did make a lot of people remember the whole birther conspiracy that Trump helped to push in response to President Obama's election. And it's absolutely true. I mean, why was Obama the one president who had his citizenship questioned, his place of birth questioned? It had to do with the color of his skin. Yeah.
I mean, I think 2 things. Number one, right before he says, "Go back to where you came from," he says, "How dare these people tell us how to run our government?" They're in our government. They were elected duly by their own representatives, and what you're seeing here is not just a demonization of obviously people of color and people of different races, but a demonization of Democrats really as illegitimate, as not legitimate enough to lead the country and actually have a say in policy, despite having every right, every much democratic legitimacy as everyone else. And the other thing, and I think we kind of touched on this at the beginning, is that Pelosi's squabbling with these 4 members, it paved the way for this.
Yes,
in many ways. I mean,
he was applauded late last Friday after he released a statement defending Pelosi against these freshman Democrats. And of course, when we say freshman Democrats, we're referring to Representative Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, and Ayanna Pressley. And then he decided to go even further with these tweets.
Yeah. I mean, I had a chance to talk with Congresswoman Tlaib over the weekend, and what she was saying is the bickering isn't coming from us. It's not coming from the squad. We're working. We're highlighting and uplifting, what's happening down at the border. That is our number 1 priority. It's these, the leadership that is doing this sort of one-sided squabbling, and now it feeds into this tension. Now feeds into Trump going, full-on racist about this situation.
In his first tweet, he references corruption.
Yeah.
And I found that so fascinating because a lot of the backlash that Trump has been dealing with from progressive members of the Democratic Party has to do with these detention centers, these detention facilities where migrants have been getting incredibly sick. At least 24 people have died in US custody as a result of these terrible unsanitary conditions. And I bring up that first mention of corruption in his tweet because this is what you're looking at right now in these images. This is the face of corruption. I mean, the amount of money we've given private companies that run these facilities is out of control. Just to give you an idea, and this is according to reporting from NBC News, private prison firm Geo Group has reportedly made $500 million for migrant detention centers since Trump's zero tolerance policy began. And that's just one. Then there's Southwest Key, which did receive government contracts under Obama, but also under Trump as well. Between 2015 and 2018, $955 million in federal contracts. We're spending $775 per day per migrant at these detention facilities. And we see the conditions that they're kept in. They're not using that money to actually improve the living conditions of these individuals. In fact, they're using this to pad their pockets, and I think it's abundantly clear here. But with that said, I do wanna just go to what Ayanna Pressley had to say in response to these tweets, because you're absolutely right, David. What we see from Ayanna is very similar to the statements that Rashida Tlaib gave you. This is what racism looks like. We are what democracy looks like, and we're not going anywhere except back to DC to fight for the families you marginalize and vilify every day. Now, how has Trump responded to the backlash? Well, let's take a look at his press conference.
Well, I didn't mention names, and I didn't do that. If you're not happy here, then you can leave. As far as I'm concerned, if you hate our country, if you're not happy here, you can leave. And that's what I say all the time. That's what I said in a tweet, which I guess some people think is controversial. A lot of people love it, by the way. A lot of people love it. But if you're not happy in the US, if you're complaining all the time, very simply, you can leave. You can leave right now. Come back if you want. Don't come back. It's okay too. But if you're not happy, you can leave. Well, they're very unhappy. I'm watching them. All they do is complain. So all I'm saying is, if they want to leave, they can leave, John. They can leave. I mean, I look at Omar. I don't know. I never met her. I hear the way she talks about Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda has killed many Americans. These are people that, in my opinion, hate our country. Now, you can say what you want, but get a list of all of the statements they've made. And all I'm saying that if they're not happy here, they can leave. They can leave, and you know what? I'm sure that there'll be many people that won't miss them. But they have to love our country. They're Congress people, and I never used any names. But these are people, quiet. These are people that if they don't like it here, they can leave. And I don't know who's gonna miss them, but I guess some people will.
So he's essentially doubling down because leave and go where?
Yeah.
3 of them were born here in the United States, and Representative Omar is a US citizen.
And the thing is, when he says, if you don't like it, you can leave, that's totally counterproductive to actually being an American and making your country better. Because if you don't like it and actually run for office and you get elected, that's how you make change. And so being a part of that is really important. But something I'd really like to hit on as well is that there's no coincidence. There's a reason that he's attacking 4 women of color, who are new in the political sector as freshman Democrats. I've just spent a book writing on this. It's just sex-based discrimination to make them feel like they can't have their voice and use it in the process. And so pretending that they can't be there and that their voices aren't legitimate and essentially harassing them out of speaking up is what he's looking to do. And unfortunately, a lot of people are playing into that. Fortunately, they are strong enough and they're pushing back.
I mean, love it or leave it. You know, that's a pretty common, right?
From like the most ignorant people imaginable.
From the most ignorant people on earth, from going back decades. But you know, there are plenty of white male Democrats who won in 2018 and are you know, just as belligerent in terms of policy towards Donald Trump, but he's picking out 4 women of color to be the locus of this love it or leave it statement.
I think there's a reason for that, though. So
there's a big reason.
Yeah.
Well, a reason other than
he's a racist.
What we discussed, and I mean that's obvious. But there is, I think, a common characteristic among these freshman Democrats that does rub Trump the wrong way. And AOC laid it out perfectly in her tweets. So I want to share that with you. Mr. President, the country I came from and the country we all swear to is the United States. But given how you've destroyed our border with inhumane camps, all at a benefit to you and the corporations who profit off them, you're absolutely right about the corruption laid at your feet. And then this was my favorite part, okay? She says, but you know what's the rub of it all, Mr. President? On top of not accepting an America that elected us, you cannot accept that we don't fear you either. Okay, that's it, boom. Like that's, I know that rubs him the wrong way. Absolutely. Because you have these strong women who are principled, they're uncorruptible. They're not there because they're interested in having this lifelong career in politics. They were encouraged to run because of what America has become. Under Trump's watch, under previous administrations where, you know, Obama didn't deliver on a number of things he should have delivered on, especially when it came to some of the systemic racism in the country. And so all of a sudden you have people who are fighting him from a very genuine and principled place, and they're not fearful, and he can't stand it.
Yep, and also fighting him from a lower place on the social power totem pole where they're not going to back down. Essentially, they're not gonna know their place. They're going to speak up and push back. And so he's trying to hit him with hostility, all sorts of things to say, stay in your place, know your place, you know, and the reality is it's like this ain't Gilead and they're not gonna let it become that. And so I love that these women are speaking up and pushing back and saying we have every right to be here and to have our voice to own it and use it.
Exactly.
I saw Representative Omar speak actually over the weekend, and one of the things she said was, you know, it's hard for those in power to make room for those who challenge power. And you know, she was talking about a lot of people with that statement, not just Trump, but maybe Speaker Pelosi. But I think it was pretty profound. One thing that was amazing about that press conference that we didn't see there is that he started talking about AOC, and he specifically started talking about the Amazon HQ2 situation in Long Island City, Queens, right? And he said, well, she kicked Amazon out of New York City. And that was terrible for New York City. This is Trump speaking now. Trump has spent 2 years talking about the Amazon Washington Post, how Jeff Bezos is a terrible person. And then all of a sudden, when he's challenged by a Hispanic woman, a woman of color, he gets the back of Amazon and their right to take $6 billion or however much it was out of New York City just for the privilege of them putting a headquarters there. So it just showed that entire fake fight was just a total fraud on the part of Trump. And his real fight is against people of color, against women, and so on.
Absolutely. You know, I think it makes sense to have a longer discussion. Unfortunately, we can't do it right now, but I want to have a longer discussion about electoral and political strategy, because what you just mentioned is one example of how Trump fights dirty and isn't principled. So if you're a principled lawmaker and you want to fight Trump, how do you do it effectively knowing he doesn't really have a strategy? He doesn't have any limits or boundaries. He's willing to do or say anything or change his story at the drop of a hat just to suit whatever agenda he has at that very moment. And that's a very difficult thing for certainly career politicians to deal with because they're not used to it, but also for progressives who have gotten elected into Congress and do want to fight him, but maybe don't know the best strategy in which to do so. One final thing I do want to add, though, is Nancy Pelosi did come out and say that she's defending the freshman Democrats, which is important given the infighting that's been happening in the Democratic Party. She said, "Our caucus will continue to forcefully respond to these disgusting attacks. The House cannot allow the president's characterization of immigrants to our country stand." And I also want to note that the House is planning on voting on a resolution to condemn Trump's statements as racist. Okay, great. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, they were certainly in a rush to do that when it came to Representative Ilhan Omar and what she had to say about the Israeli government. So I would assume that they would want to do this when it comes to Trump because his statements were clearly and blatantly racist. Like, there's no question about it.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.